This is Bam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Yoav Shalev, and you're the creator and founder and designer of the HZP app, which I downloaded today, and we're going to talk about that. But it's a music streaming app that provides you with the freedom to listen to any song returned at 440 hertz or any other software. I'm not going to say
Solfeggio, yeah,
Solfeggio
solfeggio frequencies,
you
and
can see,
yeah,
yeah, and 432 hertz, and I found other levels of whatever frequency you want to check it out, but it's you don't have to worry about precious time in converting it. And it was a really interesting. I used it for my own music because I am a musician, and I did find the results really interesting and pleasurable. I did like what it did to my music. So before we get into that, I do ask everybody who's on the show a couple of things before we get into your story. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
my kids. First and foremost, my kids. I do everything that I do in order to try to build a better world for them, a better, just everything. It's just my kids.
I think that's always, I think, being a family guy myself, I do everything for my wife and my daughter. And I think that's where everything starts and then goes out from there. And then you
Yeah,
try to affect the people around you in your community, try to have a
yeah,
positive impact. But you start like at the microcosm, start at home, then you go out to the macrocosm and you affect that. But
absolutely.
I think that's cool. So what made you get interested in this whole idea of changing frequencies of music that people listen to go outside of the 440 hertz zone, and maybe tell the story about that? If you're not a musician, you probably, or an audiophile, people probably don't know what we're talking about. So I don't
Hmm.
know how you want to introduce that to the public.
Wow, it's kind of a intertwined story. Um, so I've been in the music space for quite a while. As a teen, I was a DJ. I've amassed quite a big catalog of music, about 1,000 different CDs, 100 gigs of music. Um, and I think it was the pandemic, around uh, pandemic, if we can call it that, COVID, where I started seeing a lot of chatter come up about different frequencies. And my wife and I got COVID pretty hard. And I started to look for ways to get access to these frequencies, this type of content. Um, and I started searching online, and all I could find was two pretty buggy apps that just changed the music from 440 hertz to 432 and 528. Didn't work well, or well enough to my standards. And then I was looking for more content, and all I could find was like meditation music or
Mm,
some relaxation, sleep, inducing music on Spotify and YouTube. But was no real way for me to validate, one, that music was really retuned to that frequency,
yeah, you didn't
and
have the
two,
actual like
I didn't have the
like
technology. Yeah, and I also wanted to listen to music all day long. I didn't want to just listen to that meditation music, every now and then. So I looked and looked and looked at all the different ways to retune all my music. And when I landed on a solution, like a free solution, it just dawned on me that it would take hours upon hours to retune my catalog. Like, it would take a ridiculous amount of time just to retune one song to one frequency. And you had to redo it over and over and over, and then manage lots of duplicate files, like each song retuned to all the different frequencies. I was like, this is not
Mhm.
manageable. This will not work. Um, so I hired a developer to build a music app for me, for myself, my own pleasure, and my wife. Um, and that's how it started.
Wow, that's
And
interesting. But in terms of the frequencies, what drew you to the changing of the, like, I guess the core frequency that musicians always are at,
Yeah,
is 440. And even when we use DAWs and mastering and mixing consoles, whether you use a Neve board or whatever, everything's priced at 440. Like there's nothing that's really taking you from a mastering board to other levels, or people don't go beyond 440 because that's the key frequency. That's like the concert tone, so
it's the
the
concert
everybody's,
pitch. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I
So
mean,
every
it's
if,
designed with a reason because ever since the 1930s, I think it was 1939, there was a convention in Germany where they just landed. Okay, from now on, the A note in the fourth octave, what's known as the A4 note, will forever be tuned to 440 hertz, and then you work the scale up and down from there. And that's what they landed on. That became like the de facto um, standard, the pitch standard, or the concert pitch
yeah,
standard that
concert pitch.
everybody's familiar with, for better or worse. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories running around, like why they did that, and but I don't really think that matters, to be honest, because in a way they actually made a service to the world by simply unifying everybody and making it so that
Yeah,
everybody
the
is on the
standard.
same pitch.
Yeah.
Because now with technologies like ours, it just made it really simple for us to retune 99% of all the music that's out there to whatever frequency that you want. So
Yeah, because your solution is like you on your app. Like, I was able to find my own music, which is out there on streaming services. I found like four of my songs, and I was able to just pick a frequency and listen to the differences between the different frequencies. And then I was like, wow, it does sound. I actually found I liked it. It was pleasing to my ear at very high end frequencies toward the 800 level or
mhm.
above. But that was just my taste, and I was playing with the lower frequencies, and I said, "Wow, it's interesting. It's changing." And I wrote the music, and I played the music, so I kind of
Yeah,
knew what I had done. I knew what the original master sounds like, right?
yeah.
And I used to hear what the difference is. So, I'm coming from a different perspective rather than maybe not healing with the music. Though a lot of songwriters, we think philosophically that our words and music do heal people, but
Well,
the actual
it's
sound
more than
waves,
philosophical. I mean, when you think
yeah.
about it, words carry a lot of weight and power, and
But the waves
audio
themselves.
and audio. Yeah, I mean, when you think about audio, and you're an audio guy, all audio is air compression. It's the compression of air moving in space, in a defined space, at a defined frequency or amplitude, and that really builds the characteristics of a sound. Now, it's been beyond scientifically proven that sound has power and carries power. If you look at opera singers that can reach really high octaves, their voice is powerful enough to shatter glass. There
Mhm.
are other, you go and you ride next to someone who has a subwoofer in their trunk, and it will vibrate the entire car. Like everybody around that car keeps
Where you
vibrating.
play, a concert with Marshall amps, and you got
Exactly.
a Les Paul, and it goes through a set of Marshalls, oh, then the power of the power chord for
Yeah.
real.
You can feel it. I mean, and in nature, if you go to, um, you don't have to go anywhere. If there's like a thunderstorm in your area, and
Oh,
if
yeah.
lightning strikes really close to you, you'll feel that thunder.
The
It will
boom.
shake your entire, room or building or whatever. So sound has a lot of power, and it was a very simple thought exercise for me to realize that if sound can be used to destroy and damage and break things,
You can heal.
why can't it do the inverse of that and heal and
Yeah.
help and soothe? So then I start looking at like the top three most soothing sounds for humans, and it was so simple. And I wonder if it's something that I asked the guys who interview me. I let them guess what the top three sounds
Well,
are.
I would assume just, well, being a musician, what I've done with like field recordings is like going out to a river and recording a river, recording the sounds of a forest. And I wasn't the only one that did that. Yes, in the 1970s did that at the beginning, one of their albums, Fragile.
Yep.
And I found for my own sleep purposes, I have a noise machine
Hmm.
that mimics like thunderstorms or ocean or wind, and it helps me relax and kind of zone into my sleep state.
Right.
So I found that those things actually help me personally. I don't know what other people think, but that's where
Right.
my head's.
So you nailed it. The number one kind of sound that we are drawn to is anything that has to do with water, because we're water beings. I mean, we're 70% water. So whether it's a stream, like in a forest, or going to the ocean and hearing the waves, um, that's the number one. Number two is bird song, which is also forest, but bird song gives us a sense of livelihood, a sense of understanding that there's creatures around us, that everything's
Mhm.
alive. And the third one, which is what I found really interesting, was fire crackling,
Wow.
which when you go back to like our tribal days,
Oh, yeah, sitting around the fire. Yeah.
yep, sitting around the fire and listening to it, because fire provided a few things. One, it's safety from predators and being able to architect, fire and use it against predators. And it also gave us the ability to cook and prepare meals. So these three, individually and combined, provide a very strong relief. And that's why whenever people go and sit around campfires, next to streams, and if there's bird song, in the morning, they feel very soothed. They feel very connected, with nature. It really is astonishing how basic we are, even
Well,
though we're.
a lot of times human beings forget like we're all connected to the earth or Gaia, right?
Yep,
And I'm a Buddhist, so we kind of believe in the kind of the universe. Like we're all connected to the universe, the macrocosm and the microcosm. Like there's an interconnectedness. So the things
absolutely.
you do affect even non-decisions affect things, right?
Well, not
So
decision is a decision. It's a
yeah, it's still a
decision not to
decision.
decide. Yeah,
Yeah, so you're still like you're not like just alone in the void. Like what you choose to do has consequences, like
yeah,
karma. The
yep.
idea. But the
Now,
idea with music is like the frequencies of being like in tune or being like discordant or dissonant or noise or you in harmony. Like so as a musician, we already know is if you're a singer songwriter musician, you can channel feelings
yep.
based on rhythms, frequency, you know,
There
sounds.
are
You
known frequencies that will cause people to feel
behave,
stress
behave a
and
different way.
yeah, and nausea, and I mean, a lot of movies use those undertones to amplify the stress or the anxiety feeling, in
Horror
specific
films.
scene. Yeah, exactly. In horror films and specific scenes to amplify the emotional connection. And the inverse of that, they use really powerful emotional kind of frequencies to amplify, to make us tear, like
Yeah,
Disney movies, for example.
yeah. There's
Um,
just like the way you can trigger melancholy. Like, if you think about like a classic voice that embodies melancholy is like Karen Carpenter.
yep,
Karen Carpenter, every time you hear her, even if she's singing a song that's supposed to be happy, there's melancholy embodied in her voice.
yeah,
And when you hear it, no matter what the song is, she just kind of triggers that. And it's because, frequencies have the ability to trigger like sound paintings in your mind or feelings or like that's how we connect. And how human beings interpret it is like different for every person, but there's some universal keys or truths that you can find the same reaction
yeah,
across the board.
absolutely. I mean, when you think about language, it's all voicing different sounds in order to be able to communicate your ideas, to pass one idea from one mind to the other. So it's definitely like our ability to pass emotions and ideas just by using voice and sound is unlike any other creature. And what I found particularly interesting is that sound is one of those forces of nature that I think are the most underrated. It's one of the only ones that I found that do not abide with the. It doesn't comply, not comply, but gravity doesn't affect it,
Hmm.
which I found really interesting because you can, like, arguably, if you have a strong enough amplifier and you point like a big speaker out into outer space, that sound wave will keep on traveling.
Keeps on going. Yeah, it's not as
It,
fast as
it
light,
might,
but it keeps on
yeah,
going.
it might get, diffused with space and time, but still, it's that's pretty darn cool. And I bet you that some aliens have figured that out, and that's how they can manipulate, flight, probably with sound.
But
That's just a hypothesis that I have, but
yeah, there's a lot of interconnectedness, between the sound and light
yep.
and physics and the whole like
Well,
in
it's all math. It
it's
all
always
comes
all
down to
math.
math. Yeah.
Yeah, music is math. So people like like musicians are like they're not into logic, but like there's a logic to music.
Yeah.
There's timing, there are frequencies, there are keys, there are rules,
Right.
right?
So it's
And
mathematics. It's
it's
all, yeah.
yeah, it's just defining maybe it's left brain, right brain that triggers like where you get the muse idea from, like
Yep.
what inspires you to do what you do.
Hmm.
But it's just interesting that music has the power to heal, which I think all musicians kind of know this. That's why we're in it because
Yeah.
we feel that it heals us. It's like as a creator, I feel that I get a lot of value from just practicing or
Yeah.
just writing, whether it's going to entertain anybody doesn't matter. I get a cathartic effect by even getting into my zone. I mean, I take synthesizers and I play with sine waves and pulse waves, and I spend hours just building a tone before I even hit a song. And I
Yeah.
find that process of doing that in listening to the tones, it
Yeah.
kind of soothes me. Whether it soothes anybody else, is like it's soothing me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very meditative. Um, but beyond that, I think if you look at like the origins of sound healing, and what our app does is just a gateway to this huge space called sound healing. Um, and there's just, you go back to like the tribalism, and the shamans that used to dance next to the fire or perform rituals with drums and didgeridoos and flutes and whatnot, and rhythm and voice. A lot of it had to do with it helps not only soothe but amplify, like our biology to. I don't know. I'm not the best guy to explain this, but
Yeah, the
um,
biological
it, it-
aspect. Yeah.
but the biological, like, it stimulates different things in our biology in order to actually release blockages
Oh
and
yeah.
improve the flow between organs and the communication between organs in order to actually be able to perform the self healing that our body already knows how to do.
I
So
mean, I
it's
think
kind
it
of,
makes a lot of sense because I mean, your heart is on a frequency. You got
yep,
brain waves that are running frequencies.
yep,
So there's frequencies already in the human system,
yep,
right? And if you find, like a discordant, frequency could be like a cancer or a tumor or a cyst or some kind of disease is probably running in a not in the prime, not in the optimal frequency, right? So if you start to realize that there are actually biological effects of sound waves that are not invasive or destructive, but maybe are promote healing, promote biological responses,
so
right? So
it's,
maybe we don't fully understand, but now you start to look at it. And ancients might have understood, but we didn't. They might have wrote about it in mystical terms, and then
yeah,
people didn't believe it was real because it was mystical. But just because something's mystical doesn't mean it's not valid.
exactly. And I don't know what kind of diagnosis procedures they had back then, but I know that today, there's a lot of research going on in actual hospitals. And as of a year ago, I saw a big, real breakthrough paper come out declaring that they were able to treat someone who had cancer with ultrasound that was able to kill 70% of the cells of the infected cancerous cells with just one treatment. With
That's a positive thing because using radiation and chemo, like I'm a cancer survivor, so I know the story of dealing with those types of sources. I didn't have ultrasound
yeah,
back when I was 25 years old and I had cancer. They didn't even think about it. They used an ultrasound to look at it,
right,
but not to fix it.
right.
Right? They would use the chemo and the radiation and the physical surgery
Yep.
to fix it.
They
But
still
now,
do. They
yeah,
still do because it's not.
it's not all the
There
way
aren't
there.
enough, doctors promoting the sound therapies or the alternative medicine. All the different therapeutics that are out there. But I just saw that and I thought that is remarkable
Well, it's
to
very
be.
science fiction. It's kind of like Star Trek. You think
Yeah,
about Star Trek, there's a lot of in science fiction, you can see in those stories, they don't actually cut. They don't actually use like a lot of,
yeah.
the science fiction story is like they have these machines and they're doing something without touching the body.
Like infusing with plasma or something.
Yeah, they're doing
Yeah,
things like electronically. So they're kind of doing it in
yep,
a way through frequencies. If you look at it as a word, they just got this machine, but it's not actually cutting. So it's doing something with some kind of technology that's not invasive. So what is that? It's probably like sound. It's probably like
it
what you're talking about.
it could be. It could be a mix of sound and light and lasers and
Yeah, all that.
different using different frequencies on the spectrum, um, and different amplitudes to control the power of them, the magnitude. I want to believe that it's all there.
Well, I
That
think
it,
it's just stuff that exists that we just don't know. Just like we don't know how to go
yeah,
faster than light, but they're probably aliens that do, right?
probably
Yeah,
it's very plausible. I mean, I think if you, what are the chances that they're not? I mean,
yeah,
considering what we think we know about the universe and how many
yeah.
universes, and
Yeah.
it,
Well,
it
there's all kinds of ways. Like there's like a wrinkle in time you can kind of fold
yeah,
time.
yeah,
You don't have to actually hit the speed. There could be a process where you take can point A and B and folding it.
yep.
Like if you ever read
Just
Wrinkle in Time.
teleport really
Yeah.
quickly. Yeah,
Yeah. So there's sometimes we always think kind of like sequentially. Like,
linearly. Yes.
yeah, we got to
Yeah,
go to A to B. It's like, what if you bring A to B all at
exactly.
once? Like, what if you're able to kind of go through dimensionals? Like, what if you go through and
Mm,
theoretical physics is already thinking about those things. Yeah,
right.
I get into science fiction. I know a lot of science fiction writers are
Yeah,
on the cutting edge of some truths. Like some of these science fiction writers actually go and look at the research and then kind of hypothesize what you could do.
right.
And it's kind of all in the same place. It's like if we think about the naturopathic or holistic things, they tend to be less, rooted in what is today. Like they think about things that might be in the past and things that are in the future. It's kind of just not necessarily like where we are right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a lot of theories claiming that the present is just some sort of temporary observation, but there's a lot of happening, before and after that. Just like you said, you can fold time and move between different dimensions and different timelines in order to bring information both from the future and from the past.
Yep.
Um, to me, it's either that or that we're living in like a crazy simulation. One of
What the
it's just
other?
hard to explain anything else. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Well, in somebody's laboratory, we're under the microscope and we don't realize
yeah,
it. But it's just interesting that your app is so easy to use because I did download it, like I said, and I took some of my own music.
yeah,
And like I know there's probably I think there's when I was reading about I could actually load like one of my wave files
yeah. You
and
can it
actually convert it, but or bring it through your
so
process.
it
But I
doesn't.
was actually
Yeah,
just streaming,
yeah.
to hear my own.
So that actually, it started as an MP3 player only. And then we added all the other file formats, and on all the native um, kind of systems, the iOS, Mac,
Mm.
Android, Windows, you can still do that. You can bring in all of your files, retune them in real time. We don't create any duplicates. We just change the frequency in real
Existing.
time so that you can enjoy it in real time. And you can also, as you're listening, you can say, wait, I like this frequency better than I like the other. And just, not have to wait the entire song, or to really not know what's good for you.
Yeah. But I
So,
like the fact that I could switch to multiple frequencies and it was very seamless. It
yep.
didn't take a long time to load. It wasn't like buffering. It was very easy to use.
Yeah, it's
So I
literally real time.
yeah, it's
Everything
all
happens
real
in real
time
time.
and that's super like I'm from, I'm child of the 70s
Yeah.
and I'm in software design myself, but for banking and stuff. And so
Mhm.
I've been through situations where like, okay, we thought it was great, like old DOS.
Right.
Like, if you're in an old DAW, you have to sit there and wait for it to render for like an
Yeah,
hour, walk away. Like, you
even
just then you
all
think,
DOS
"Oh."
today, if you create a stem and you wanna if it's done mastering, you still have to wait a long time until your actual creation is ready.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I and then you realize like, "Oh, I didn't do it right. Now I gotta do it again, and spend another 2 hours waiting for it." But, yeah, real-time processing is always helpful and
Yeah,
convenient, and I
yeah,
did appreciate it, and I did like that I was just, going through it before the show. And I was actually, wow, this is really interesting. I really need to dive deeper into like, why do I like it at this frequency versus that frequency? And
right.
it was different songs where I wrote different, I used different instruments. And so certain songs that were working really well with certain frequencies and other ones were working like better with other ones. And I'm like, wow, I need to dive into this more. And I was kind of getting lost in it. But
Yeah,
I think it's cool. I think that I think anybody that wants to, that wants to care about the difference. We got kids today that don't care about the sound quality, you know. But I'm an audiophile, so I'm
yeah,
always looking for it. Like I want to hear it the right way or
right.
the best way. Maybe there's no right way, but the best way.
And that's actually interesting because there is no right way. And just like you said, one song can sound really good at one frequency and another in a different one. And I think that's what makes this app so special, is that it gives you the opportunity to choose what you want to listen to and what frequency without having to commit to a specific frequency. It gives you that
Yeah.
option, that flexibility, that freedom to really own the frequencies that surround you. And yes, some of the audiophiles out there and the producers will say, yeah, well, um, every song has all the frequencies, because if you look at the 88 keys, there's lots of different frequencies. Well, yeah, that's true. But I just challenge you, try it, because you'll
Yeah.
see and you'll hear that specific songs all of a sudden. A lot of people say that, and I think they're just somewhat afraid of change. Because honestly, once you do listen to a song that you've heard all your life, retune, and you're like, "Holy shit,
Yeah, it
this
sounds.
sounds a lot better."
It's like
And
remastering. It's a
yeah,
whole nother level of remastering.
yeah,
And like I'm a child of the '70s, so and I'm a big analog guy, right? So I use a lot of analog synthesizers. They're not
right.
digital. They use transistor level tech. And there's something about, and people will say, well, there's no difference. Or the
There's a
digital
lot of
stuff.
difference. A
Yeah, but
lot
people
of
will say the
difference. Yeah,
digital stuff can
yeah.
replicate. I'm sorry, but my Moog doesn't
No,
sound like the X7, right?
does
It doesn't
not.
sound like a digital synth. It sounds like an analog synth from the '70s because it is.
Right.
And there's a difference. There's a sound quality difference. It's like when I listen to, the Who's Tommy on vinyl
Yep.
and versus I listen to it on CD and then I listen to it on MP3. On MP3, it's like I'm losing like a lot of the warmth and the headroom that I heard when I was listening to the vinyl. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
there's all this stuff I'm missing. I
Yeah.
don't hear it because
It's
they
getting
decided,
better. but it's
It's getting
still
better, but it's
but
still
it's still
not.
different, and I think that's why you see, like, a resurrection of vinyls and turntables in
Yeah.
stores, and people are going back to analog. I
Yeah,
wouldn't be
again,
surprised if tapes,
tube
like
amplification. I mean, I
yeah,
got guys, friends that have, like, tube amplifier, added tubes to their, systems, to their
really
vinyl
old
system.
school. Wow.
Yeah, because they want the tubes and they want the real,
Mhm.
solid state, and they want
Yep.
tubes, and they want the best, needles that you can get. They're looking at all the high fidelity stuff back in the 70s and 80s. That's where my head was at because that's what it was
Yep.
before the CD, before the
Yep.
MP3.
That's how I grew up. I grew up on vinyls,
Yeah.
and
So there's something about, I don't know. I think you pay attention. Like if you're just listening to music on a phone, like a lot of times you're jumping around. Like if I listen to an album, I actually get pulled into the album like a novel. And I'm not gonna probably jump around that record. I'm probably gonna let it go through what it is.
yeah,
And I have an appreciation for that because I come from the age of the album, and
yeah.
I like to hear the complete thought of the artist.
The
And I
storytelling. There's a story in an album that I feel like now it's been lost because everybody's so focused on
singles,
singles and
playlist.
yeah, and
You
like if you listen, there are some brilliant albums out there that any one particular song is a great story in of itself. But
Mhm.
when you play like the entire album, you get blown away by the
It's like
genius.
it's like Cliff Notes. Like, would you read,
Yeah,
any great American novel, just like do the Cliff Notes so you can pass the test? Or
yeah,
do you really wanna know what Grapes of Wrath is about
right.
or Pride and Prejudice is about? You're just gonna read the Cliff Note, or you're gonna actually get into the book and
Yeah,
get pulled into it. And the same thing exists with music, but some people have kind of said, "Well, you just playlist it," and if you don't listen to the full breadth of an artist, you don't really know who they are.
no.
And I think a lot of artists, like their hit doesn't really represent who they are.
And a lot of them also create for hits. It's like the entrepreneur that creates a product to make money and not creates the product for an actual solution.
Mhm.
And I feel like the art is missing there. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
they could be very gifted and talented and get hits and millions and
Bangers.
billions
Bangers.
of
Yeah,
listens, but like it's so that's my
consumption of
biggest problem
distorted.
with lots of music that's come out, in the past 20 years is it's been for me very difficult to find unique artists that actually carry, like you can actually feel that they're
Carry
coming
weight.
with, yeah, they carry their
And when I
weight.
can, artists I name check, like Hendrix, Sun Ra, Davis, Coltrane,
Yeah.
Johnny Cash. I mean, going back to indie records with bands like, you know, Joy Division, the early like Talking Heads. It's like, would you really see a Talking Heads actually happen today? Probably not.
It's
You
hard.
know, it's too
There's such
weird,
an abundance, but a lot of
too
people
different.
also doing the same thing over and over. Everybody's
Yeah.
trying to copy each other.
Well, this it's interesting because Spotify allows a lot of indie records to exist, but nobody finds them. Like there's no MTV that's pushing them. There's no college radio that's kind of curating them,
Well,
right?
you want to hear something really outrageous? The stats are that 85% of music we listen to is music that we already know. Like the
Yeah, that makes
discovery is so limited. It's
very
only
limited.
15%. And even though that there's an abundance now more than ever, access to all this music. Because back when we grew up, there was only MTV and
Mhm.
VH1 maybe, and the
Yeah,
local
college
radio
radio.
station,
Yeah,
the college radio. And if you didn't get onto the playlist, you didn't exist.
yeah, you didn't happen.
Nobody, I mean, yes, maybe someone would pass you a mixtape or whatever, when you were walking by, but that didn't happen. And now there's just such an abundance of music out there, and people
They still miss it.
still still miss it because they're listening to the same old, what
Well, if you keep on listening to Tom Petty, not that it's bad, but you keep on
yeah,
listening to Led Zeppelin, Tom Petty, and
But I
Beyonce
don't
over
blame
and
them, to
over.
be honest, because
Well,
there's
I mean, it's kind
like
of designed
finding
that
good
way.
stuff. There's so much crap out there, so finding
Yeah.
the good stuff out of all this abundance is also a challenge.
But it's also the kind of curiosity of the audience.
Yeah.
I grew up being a college radio kid.
Hmm.
I grew up reading Billboard and reading a lot of, music magazines looking
Yeah.
for the new acts. Right.
Yeah.
So I was always looking for the underground because I was drawn to bands like Velvet Underground
Yeah.
or Alex Chilton and Big Star. I was bound to guys who didn't make it. I was always into the story of like, the Velvets were great. The Big Star was great. Nobody ever knew who they were. I
Right.
was always thinking like some of these underground bands, these critically acclaimed bands that didn't have audiences.
Hmm.
Being a musician and being an experimental musician myself, I was kind of drawn to those stories
Yeah.
because
Who's
I
going to be the
want
next big thing?
I'm looking for something different. So I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to look for what's like in the top 20. I was looking
Yeah.
for the bottom 500. And I was always looking at that. And even today, like my show initially started talking to emerging and independent artists that weren't known. And I did like 300 interviews before I
Wow.
started talking to other people. And so, I even talked to a band like last week that was kind of a brand new band out of Tennessee, Nashville, which is
Hmm.
a big scene. And now I've
Right.
got connections into that scene. I'm going to be talking to a lot of underground bands in that scene. But my mindset is I like to give people the underdog a chance.
Yeah.
But that's not really where most people are. They
No.
don't want to get into that.
No. Unfortunately, not. But I think
but
that should change, and it will change. It has to change because
but I think people
how
get
many
tired of
well,
it.
how much can you listen, and it's like watching the same shows over and over on TV. I mean, people like diversity. They're just
Well, it's like
unaware
a
of
cat
how to
video.
get to it.
There's like a lot of cat videos that get a million views, but how many times you gonna keep on watching the cat video? It's
Yeah,
like don't you want something different? It's like
exactly.
so eventually, the algorithms kind of drive us to keep on looking at the same thing because
Hmm.
they kind of they encourage you to use clips from known songs, right? So people build clips because the social media systems are saying, hey, use this song, which is already popular, which has already
Yeah,
been used,
yep,
and use it again
yeah.
because they're being, that's what's being
And then
pushed,
reinforce those,
reinforced.
and
Yeah,
yeah, but then I mean, I feel like a lot of those have their moment, like their peak, and as fast as they go up,
they
that's
go
how
down.
fast they come
Well, it's like
crashing
one
down.
hit wonder. Like if you're a
Yeah,
one hit wonder, like you have like a hell on earth
right. But
because like
one,
nobody wants to. Like, that's your only thing to claim to fame.
yes. However, one hit wonders. There's an entire generation of one hit wonders because
Right.
it wasn't only limited to a few days. It was like weeks, if not months, of
Yeah.
being at the top, of the charts and overplayed. I mean, I think back then also it was a lot harder to get into the playlist.
Oh yeah. Well,
I
it's
mean,
all payola.
yeah. Well,
It's like kind of hard to get, but you gotta have the cash to get
yeah,
get the song on the radio. And if you don't got it, you don't got it.
yeah,
But it's yeah, it's just interesting today. There's this deluge of all this stuff, and then people still go for what's known
yeah.
because they want the known thing.
And
And
that's why I love our partnership with Audius, which I don't know if you're familiar with Audius, but
yeah,
probably,
I think I've heard it. Yeah, I've looked into them. Yeah.
yeah. It's a really really cool blockchain backed audio music API catalog that gives people free access to their music, and then they handle all the relationship with the musicians, but they are really popular with a lot of indies, and I've
Hmm.
discovered really wonderful musicians and artists and songs and playlists through listening to their popular whatever's trending, and even just looking for different keywords and seeing what comes up. Um,
It's
it's
always
really
good to
awesome.
find new scenes, because I mean I've been a SoundCloud artist forever,
Yeah.
but I am not opposed to putting my songs on all kinds of platforms. So a lot of my stuff is on like any platform you can find. I
Yeah.
found different ways to get it on different things. But yeah, it's just like you want to you look at what's out there. You see the big guys like the Spotify's and the Apples,
Yep.
and then you're like, am I really getting value as an artist, right? Am I actually being appreciated? Am I
Yep.
actually getting a good rate for my royalty? Am I
Right.
able to like monetize in other ways? And so as an artist, we look at sync licensing, we look at all kinds of things where I might not make this song available to Spotify. I might keep it in this other area to kind of give it like this kind of cult following
Yep.
or give it
Sell
a
sell
different.
it directly on your website, or
Yeah, you do it direct
yeah.
because even if I sell less units, I actually will make more money. If I like I say, if I
Right.
sell t-shirts or I sell vinyl or
Mhm.
I sell a USB, I'll make more money than I ever do on Spotify,
Yeah.
you know. And it's just that's just a fact. And so if you figure out it's like I don't have to sell millions.
No.
I can do micro batches and do a lot better. So sometimes it's like not being the biggest guy around, but actually having a better plan.
Yeah. The better monetization plan for sure. And I
Yeah, but
think that if you compare like all the different music apps, and certainly the big ones like Apple Music and YouTube Music, Spotify, even Amazon Music, it's very hard to differentiate between them because they all have more or less access to the same catalog,
yeah, same group. Yeah.
and more or less the same features. So it really is a question of where your friends are at or where your family's using versus where your musical kind of ambition is.
If you're kind of looking for like underground or kind of new artists, I've been a SoundCloud guy forever, but
Yeah.
in that zone, there's a lot of, you know, uh, experimental artists or artists that are kind of underground college radio level kind of artists
Right.
that can kind of go out there and do whatever they want. And I grew up listening to, the early REM before they got big, on IRS.
Yeah.
And it was the college radio stations that pushed them. And I was, listen to that and I say, I like the idea that I don't know what Michael Stipe is saying. I actually just like the tunes that he was doing. I didn't need him to enunciate everything. I just like the sound of what REM was
Yeah.
doing. And
The
it,
packaging of it. Yeah.
yeah, it was the whole package of it. Like the band was mysterious because I didn't really know what was going on. It was kind of drawn in. And and sometimes people today is like, whoa, like why would I get into that? But we just need the oddball things sometimes are the things that do it, That that's you don't want to have predictability. To me as an artist, is like if I do something that's totally predictable, it's boring. If I do something I know the algorithm's gonna like, was like I don't like it. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of contrary that way. But I think when it comes to something like your app though, to be able to make a choice of how you're going to listen to something. And, it's like we talked about the healing aspects. I kind of want to dive into that more.
Hmm.
Do you have more insights on like how people would use your app for those kind of aspects of music, like the healing properties? Like what are your recommendations to people that get into your app? What would they do to look at that, listen to things like that?
Right. So first of all, there's a lot of knowledge out there beyond our app that specify like all these different frequencies and what allegedly they do or for each person. I will say that from my personal experience, I don't, and this might sound odd, but I don't know that the frequencies do exactly what they are advertised as what they do for everybody as a blanket,
Hmm.
solution because we're all different.
Different, yeah.
I think that what might work for you, like A52, what it does for you could be doing something differently for me. And I might like, a different frequency, and that's fine. That's why I like to have the option to choose. With that in mind, there's a lot of we get feedback from our users about what they're doing with the frequencies. Some are using it for sleep, some are using it for to reduce anxiety. or reduce stress or help with focus and study. Some are using it in different biohacking, like, I don't know if to call it sequences or rituals or kind of like their methodology. There's a
Mhm.
lot of everything. What we are planning to do, though, is to eventually present the user with a dashboard within the
Oh,
app to allow them. Well, the way that will work is we will connect to different devices like smartwatches or fitness trackers that are
oh,
able to record vitals while you're listening to music and while you're listening to the different
oh, to
frequencies.
give you a dashboard of what the effect was for the time you were listening?
Exactly. And
Well,
then
that's
to
pretty
see if
cool.
we can correlate between um, the music and the frequencies and your
But then you have
vitals.
some evidence-based testing, you
Yeah.
actually have data.
And hopefully we'll be able to either, completely approve or prove that this works or refute that it doesn't work. But regardless, we'll have a
Well, it
huge
still
data
can
set.
work for individuals, if they
Yeah.
if they have their wearable on
Yep.
and, they notice that their numbers, their blood pressure, their heartbeat, they check you can check so many things. You can check oxygen level, you can check all kinds of stuff now.
Right. Exactly.
Um, and so, yeah, like I'm wearing some of those now, but, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just I think it's cool to be in this world where, like, you gotta interconnect in this between your wearable, what you're listening to, and, how you're listening to it, and then you're
Yep.
giving them the freedom to kinda pick the frequency, and it's just, like, instantaneous, like you said, it's real time. I mean, I actually
Yeah.
used it. Like I said before the show, I
Yeah.
was checking out 4 of my tunes, and I just kept on changing frequencies and just, wow, it's like, this one works with this one doesn't, this one and, I'm gonna go back and listen to them again, and, I was just really kind of drawn into it, and I think and I wasn't trying to use it for anything other than I'm a musician and I'm listening
Yeah.
as a producer. It's like, "Oh, what does this sound like versus what
Right.
does this sound like?" I was kind of doing that type of exercise like an engineer.
Yeah.
Like,
There's
what
a lot of engineers and musicians that come just out of pure curiosity because I mean we give them an experience, an instant experience to realize what their music would sound like in all of these different, popular frequencies versus having to spend countless hours to retune and remaster, and then wait, whatever time it is to render their songs. It gives them like an instant
yeah.
understanding of what it would sound like.
Well,
Um,
that's valuable. Like I said, the rendering alone, is a kind of a price of admission
yeah,
where you have the patience. And some know some artists is like, okay, I did this many versions, I'm done. Like I'm not going any further on this one because I got to do the next one, or
yep,
I'm just burned out on this one. But if you make it so the price of admission isn't as high, that I can actually hear different mixes, and it's not going to take that kind of because time is money. Time is like is something you're.
it's
If you
strictly
make it
money.
too
Yeah,
hard, then you're not gonna you can have all the bells and whistles, but it's like if it takes too much time to do it, you're not gonna do it. But
yep,
if you make it so it's more accessible, then you're more likely to do it.
yeah. And it's literally clicking on a button and choosing whatever you want. And it's that simple. And that,
Yeah, yeah.
and and
It's
honestly, Phantom, I made that for me and for my wife and for my kids. I wanted it to make it really, really simple for us to use. And the reason it's on the different devices because we all use different devices, and we've made it also. I push my team to make it compatible with CarPlay and Android Auto and Android TV and Amazon TV. And soon we'll also put it on Apple TV,
oh
just
wow.
so you can really listen to music. Like in my pitch perfect world, you put on your TV, you select the music that you want and the frequency that you want. There's a hidden nugget in there that I don't know if you experience, but there's a music visualizer. That's actually
Oh
how,
yeah.
and we're rebuilding that to make it like a phenomenal marketplace for visuals or creators, the creatives.
Oh, like
Um,
artists, like graphic artists can provide you with like visuals.
Yes, or anyone. We're now with different AI tools. We're
With AI,
also
yeah, you could build it without being a graphic artist, but
yep. So we're looking at allowing people to make their own visuals and submit it to the marketplace on the one hand, and then other users could enjoy their visuals and their creations and create some
okay.
sort of reward system
Okay,
between them.
not exactly an NFT, but still kind of creating like a piece of art that's kind of like an NFT at a certain level. But
Yeah, I was looking at NFTs at some point, and I'm still considering that. It could be, but it
well,
might
yeah,
be
they
just
have
a
their own.
plain, yeah, it could be just a here's a tip, a few dollars just to
Well,
like a
different
royalty
models.
payment.
The NFT, like it's the whole
Yeah,
blockchain area is like some people like it, some people don't. If you maybe
yeah,
have a different path, then some people will take that path, the other people will take this path. The more paths you
right,
offer, more adoption. So it's
exactly,
not a bad idea
right,
because some people get locked into it. It's only going to be this, and then I'm like, well, I don't know if I want that.
yeah. Well, but ultimately, I mean, that's just like the business model behind it, and what would fuel it. But I think it, growing up in the early '90s in Israel, I realized that EDM was a big thing there. And then, I mean,
Mhm.
there were three different kind of meccas for EDMs. It was Israel, it was Amsterdam, or Netherlands for that matter, and India, Goa specifically. Those were the hubs for EDM, and there was like a really, it's something frowned upon. You had to go to like raves and parties that would get broken up by cops and whatnot.
Oh,
And that was the early
that's
'90s.
yeah,
Now, though, like I think I read somewhere that in 2019, just before the pandemic, when COVID broke, over 50% of all live performances worldwide, including all theater and all sports and all stand up and all everything, 50% of all live performances was EDM, which is essentially a DJ and a light show.
yeah,
Like if you're abstracted. And that's just how powerful, like the whole. If you go back to the tribalism, it was all people around a fire with masks and was you know chanting and whatnot. So we're very drawn to like a visual musical experience. So I think
yeah.
that
Kind of remember, in the '70s we had like Pink Floyd light shows,
yep,
like
exactly,
Who laser shows.
exactly,
But and I understand that where the kids are today. Like I'm a physical musician. I play instruments. Um, and that seems to be like not where things are as much today. but like I
I would
understand
disagree. I would disagree. People love going to shows. I think it's just they've settled for a much lower bar.
lower bar. Well, I
But
think it's just like 'cause you can immediately with a DJ. It's not like going to see the Ramones, right? It's not like going to see Talking Heads, and maybe you don't like
right,
that, right? Like you can always get what you expect, right?
yeah.
Because I think it's easier. I mean, if you think about it, a club with a bunch of DJs, they don't got to go do sound checks like
No,
they
it's
do with
it's much
physical band.
cheaper, to pay
Yeah,
one
it's
DJ
cheaper.
and one VJ and you're done. I mean, you
Yeah,
got
if you're traveling, you
someone
don't
running
have to have
lights.
the
Yeah.
Econoline van with everybody stuck in the van driving from town to town.
Right.
It's a different type of mindset. And not that bands don't still do that. There's still like a lot of bands like in that Nashville scene I was talking about that
Mhm.
are musicians and they're actually physically playing
Yeah.
and they go into clubs and they're actually doing it that way. Which there's certain scenes that still. I talk to people in Berlin. I talk to people in
Yeah.
Netherlands. They are still into those type of scenes. Um, but it is the DJ, the CDJ. People using DAWs with backing tracks. Running
Yeah.
through some kind of MIDI device. I mean, that's kind of what people think music is today because that's kind of what they're growing up with.
Right. Right. So I think it is true, but I think that if you want to leave really a lifetime impression on someone, we, an orchestra, like a big
Big,
team,
yeah, big,
a big
big
band, or an actual orchestra, like a symphony or whatever.
symphony. Yeah, it's always going to have an impact.
Man, those kind of experiences are so different than anything.
Well, it's
And
just that human capability. Well, like, yeah, you can do that with the CDJ. You could do that with the
it's
automation.
not the same thing.
It's not the same thing, but
No,
you could have
it's
the
not the
light
same
show.
power. It's not the
Yeah,
same
yeah, the
energy.
light
It's
show
not.
could maybe trick you into thinking it's as good.
Yeah,
But if you actually go see the Boston Symphony or New York Symphony or
yeah,
Australia, any of the big symphonies, right?
yep,
Any of the big, you go into the actual, you know, auditorium or the opera house where you're
yeah,
going to hear it. There's something about acoustic instruments, and I'm a big believer in acoustic instruments
yeah,
and voices and people playing Stradivariuses and people playing those real German pianos.
yep.
There's nothing like that. There's
No.
always going to be, and I listen to jazz. I can listen
Well,
to a
the
jazz
space is
fusion
so
band.
optimized for that too. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
even like
it's like when you go to a field to like a big concert, and if you're not standing right next to the sound guy who's optimizing the sound to himself, essentially, you'll you'll hear so much distortion when you would just walk through, the field or whatever. But if you
mm,
go to one of these highly optimized spaces, it doesn't. Yes, it helps to be in specific locations, but it's not like dramatically different. It's not
mhm.
supposed to be dramatically different, to sit in different spaces because they're so well optimized for the acoustics and how the sound bounces off the walls. Um, it's a different kind of experience.
Or like listening to jazz. If I
Yeah.
listen to like somebody that's like channeling Coltrane or Davis or Herbie
Mhm.
Hancock or anybody that's like in that zone
Yeah.
today that's doing similar work, I'm always going to probably want to see that. Let's go to that in a
Yeah.
small space
Yep.
to listen to that versus the rave. It's because that's just my head's at. If
Yeah.
I want to have a party, I'll go to the rave. If I want to listen
Right.
to something kind of deep, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
watch the jazz band
It's about the
or go to
intention.
New Orleans and watch like the blues band.
Right. It's
You
all
know,
about the intention and where you're trying to get out of the musical experience.
yeah, because different people have they're in the party aesthetic, they're in the fun aesthetic, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. You want to have fun, you want to be out there. It's a different like I lived through the disco era.
Mhm.
I know that they weren't really trying to discern like going to see Frank Zappa or going to see the Grateful Dead. It was a different thing to go
Yeah.
to the disco house
Right.
versus listening to Zappa. Right?
Right.
That you gotta get a different experience.
Yeah. That's kind of like why we're putting back the visualizer in prominent places and within the app, simply to give people the opportunity to experience what the marriage between audio and visual could look like when
Yeah, that's
it's
cool.
totally automated and not um, unique. Like there's no two sessions that are alike.
I think that's awesome because I kind of, I love the idea what like Andy Warhol used to like link up with Lou Reed,
Yep.
and they used to do these like happenings, kind of like what Zappa used to do the same thing with the Mothers of Invention. Um, but it was very audio. They had like actors, models, filmmakers, artists on stage all at once in these happenings, and it
Yep.
was all kind of multi like disciplinary, like having all those types of artistic people all on the stage doing different things is like a carnival, but it was like
Yeah.
very interesting. And
There's
sometimes you
one
see
band
that.
that actually does this um, to this day. It's called Chpongo, and they're
Yeah.
the kind of the forefathers of ambient Sabian trance. Like it's like the hybrid between, or not the hybrid, the where psychedelics meets ambience.
Oh, that's cool.
And they go when they actually play the instruments, and they have aerial dancers and dancers and visuals, and even people making art on canvases
Oh yeah, that's
on the
definitely like a
floor.
happening. That's definitely like Zappa,
Yeah,
like or Warhol.
yeah,
That's where their head was at.
yeah,
Back in the '70s and late '60s and '70s. That's the kind of stuff that was going. It's cool to see that coming back. Sometimes it never left. It's like it's in real
Right.
microcosms here and there. But yeah, it's cool that you mentioned that. I have to go check it out.
Yeah. And them specifically also have such a unique take on music and their storytelling and ability to bridge between cultures within one piece is just remarkable. I've never heard anything like that.
Oh,
And I've been
I like to hear
listening to
about that.
them, since the early 90s. It's really remarkable.
That's definitely something I love to hear about new things or things I hadn't heard of,
Yep.
or with people doing what I like with the like the Warhol kind of scene. Um, but that's really cool that we've talked to a lot of things today. We do want to mention people that we do have your official website and I do have the download site. So https hzp.co/download. I did check that out myself on iOS and I love it on my iPhone. I'm gonna check it out on my PC, so I can do some other stuff. But it's really cool that you're offering people this tool, and it's really you know super easy to use. So I do encourage people to check that link out because it is clickable. Like right now, it's not, but once we are published on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, immediately after we finish this interview, that will be clickable, and we will be on all the major podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch the podcast by tomorrow, and they will be still clickable there. And I do have your overall website available too, official.fyi/Yoav Shalev.
Awesome.
So yeah, check
Thank
that
you.
out.
Very cool.
I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. It's been really cool. And we do encourage people to click on the links and check it out, download the app. I think it's just something new to get into if you're into music, you're into like meditation, you're into like ambient music, you're into any kind of sound difference that you're into it, you want to hear it, then check it out. It's like that's where this is at. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.